How's it going, everyone? I hope you're doing fantastic. My name is Magic Skywalker, and today I'll be talking about music colleges. And with all these upcoming deadlines, I'm sure some of you are wondering whether taking the music course is actually one of the ways for you to boost your career in the future, or is it a complete nonsense and should you just go another way? Today I want to talk about my own experience and kind of debunk a few misconceptions that you might have. I remember how I thought my course is going to look like and how did it actually turn out in reality. As I'm saying, this is my subjective opinion, and also it's from the perspective of me a few years ago. Like, I'm sure these days when I would approach any of these courses, I would have slightly different attitude. There are a few solutions that I could have implemented in my life back then that would definitely improve my life as a student. First of all, it's very important for you to sit down and figure out the goals that you want to achieve during your life at university, or what's the outcome that you're trying to get from it. It might be very obvious ones. You might want to get a degree, you might want to get more professional, learn certain things. But for example, for me, what it was is I wanted to network and I wanted to create new friendships, especially that I moved abroad and I came to London. I didn't really know anyone, and I didn't really know anyone from the creative industries. Then obviously I wanted to get taught by experienced people, and I wanted to have access to all these facilities that school could offer. But I was never really concerned about grades or my diploma at the end, which that was a mistake. But yeah, I wasn't really focused on grades. I was mainly focused on growing my community, let's say. I went through a few websites of music courses just to see what do they actually talk about. Let's move on to the first point that all these websites are talking about, which is, as I mentioned, experienced and inspirational tutors. One thing, you keep learning from people that are already within the industry, but they could also show you different paths that you might take that you have never even considered in the past before. I wanted to be a music performer, and I just wanted to come up on stage and play for live audience. But then, you learn about stuff such as you can become a session guitarist in the studio, you can become a composer or a music producer. I think something that I was really impressed by was music for media, be it Hans Zimmer kind of thing. So you can be trained how to do these kind of things. Finding out all these new paths is incredibly valuable in a professional world. It doesn't mean necessarily that you have to be famous and you have to have #1 hits in Billboard charts. It's basically, there's a lot of space for you to be creative anyway. If you enjoy this kind of content, please consider subscribing because that supports the channel. But moving on. Small class sizes and high contact hours. Well, basically, that was true in my case because I attended pretty small school and there was around 10 to 12 of us. And that was pretty beneficial from the perspective that you get to have your voice and you do get to ask questions that might concern you. The problem is that sometimes the school projects that you might be working on are not exactly met with your own needs. For example, one of my favorite modules was music live performance. We had this module where basically would be put in groups to write songs together and later perform them live in 3-week cycles. Briefs we would get sometimes would vary, but we would get stuff such as write a lost song for an album for the artist that we just analyzed throughout the week, or there's a word gray and write something that just sounds like that. As much as I really love the idea of this, the problem is that then reality kicks in and suddenly realize that in your group there are mostly singers, guitarists, one or a couple of drummers, maybe one bass player, and the rest, I don't know, there are a few people that don't play any instruments, but they were mostly focused on music production, stuff like that. You have a little bit of everything, but on the other hand, it's kind of difficult to combine a full-on band for every single group. So sometimes, I don't know, you're an instrumentalist, so you end up in a band with 3 singers, and suddenly you find out that they don't play any instruments. And instead of getting your ideas of musical development that you wanted to do through music, suddenly you learn that, okay, you have to leave all the job for singers to just sing their backing vocals, do the harmonies and stuff, and you're gonna be just playing the background tunes somewhere on your guitar or something. And obviously it is a great experience to have once in a while and to practice things like that. But then when you realize that throughout the whole year or sometimes throughout the whole course, you basically get put in the groups that you don't get to finish your ideas that you might have, and that this whole potential is just stashed somewhere to the side because you have to constantly go on compromises. I understand that that might be the reality of music industry, and I don't mean it in a sense that, oh yeah, everything was horrible, but on the other hand, it's just kind of cool to have an idea, sometimes be able to finish it fully. Another thing to bear in mind is that basically at all these colleges, these are young people. And in London, for example, that is crazy expensive place. Most of them have to work as well. I did, and I had to go full-time work. And on the side, I was also obviously studying full-time. And then when I was trying to get any social life, there was very little time to do it. But then when you want to work on like a group project, suddenly you need to find time and you have to be synchronized with everybody else. On top of that, you have to find the space to rehearse, and then everything gets kind of difficult with scheduling, and you might end up with only one person during your rehearsal, or throughout the course of 2 weeks that you had to prepare the assignment, you don't really have time to do any of this. So a lot of this was like improvising and trying to compromise on many different things. So as much as I really loved the idea of this module, at the end it didn't really turn out the way I wanted it. But that's because of external circumstances outside of the school and the people and their own motivations as well. Obviously, I'm not saying that I was the saint in all of this, because on the other hand, sometimes I was exhausted after work and I would skip the rehearsal and I wouldn't feel like writing stuff, or I wasn't feeling incredibly inspired, and all these things that can just affect your workflow. At the end, with such a short deadlines, it does impact your final outcomes, and that can get a little bit difficult. But okay, moving on to another topic as creative and inspiring learning environment. And yes, that's true. You are surrounded by creative people of all ages. Many of them have different experiences, and every single person writes in different ways. So it's great to spend time with these people and be able to explore different ways of music writing. I've met an amazing guy that was a great acoustic player, and he played in a way that maybe I saw it on YouTube, but I never actually saw it in real life. And he was doing all these weird tappings, and he had incredible skills of songwriting. So I tried to steal as much from that as possible and, adapt it to my own style. And then in exchange, I could show him some stuff on a guitar of lead playing and like how to play with distortions and how to modify your sound in that way and how to use different effects. So it's great to be able to talk to people like that and just kind of exchange your ideas. On the other hand, obviously, there are young people that sometimes they do see music industry as a very competitive, and because it is, but the problem is, if you adopt the mindset of competitiveness, suddenly you see all the other people as enemies and as your competition. So many of them try to hide their own tricks and they didn't really want to share stuff. Tip from me, if you're ever in this situation, just share everything that you have, because the more you share with people, the more they open up as well. And suddenly, if you're all playing open cards, there's only growth between the people and nobody's losing. To be honest, if you give away all of your tricks, nobody's going to use them against you. It's more likely everybody's going to share their ideas with you as well, and you can only grow from this. So I think this is the right mindset to have in this environment. Also, another thing about the environment is obviously facilities of the school, facility desk that we had at our school. It would allow you to rent out for free any guitar effect, amplifiers, instruments in general, different keys, microphones. It was everything that you can imagine. You had like a full-on album that you could go through and just find the right thing for you, and it was a great experience. But on the other hand, obviously with the number of students that had, as much as we had little students within the class, there were a few classes as well, and all of that combined, when people had assignments exactly in the same time, the whole stuff was just getting rented out. School allow you to take rehearsing spaces, such as take the classrooms when they are not in use for lessons. There was not that many of them either, which is very understandable, because obviously if there were like hundreds of students, or I don't know how many, but hundreds of students, let's say, and just a limited number of rooms, it is impossible to accommodate every single person at whatever time they please. Sometimes you might need to have a room with drums and keys and stuff like that, but then you get to rent out only a room that has blackboard in it and nothing else. You kind of have to think about how you can reshape your idea that you initially had, and for example, build it only on acoustic instruments and stuff like that. School allow you to use their studios, which is a great thing. Professional studios are very expensive. First of all, you learn how to work within the studio, but second, you get to have your own hands experience, which is great on paper. But then usually schools are equipped with 2 studios like that, or maybe 3 or more, but like basically it's very limited number of those. And usually these are prioritized for the second or third graders in their final year when they have like a recording studio project to do. And then it turns out that the time is limited in those studios. You have only 2 hours. And if you have 2 hours, it's very difficult to fit your own session within that when it comes to setting up the microphones, instruments, then properly setting up the session, getting into the zone, because obviously it's stressful. So you kind of need a few warm-up takes and stuff like that. And suddenly you realize that everything was taking up all the time that you had, and somebody's knocking on the door because their session is just about to start. And obviously at the end, you have to cut out a little bit of time as well to clean up after yourself. Some people did not account for this, and they're a little bit late. They suddenly take up the space of somebody else's slot, and that everything is just kind of rolling over, and everybody's stealing each other time. And at the end, one person just ends up with like half an hour of time. You know, so these kind of things with facilities, they always look amazing on paper. In reality, I think, especially if you go to visit any of these schools that you might be attending, it's good to ask how many students are on the campus, how many people are using actually these facilities, and how does the system work. I'm trying to think now if I have any other ideas that I wanted to mention. Probably when I turn off the camera, suddenly things are going to start popping in my head. But I encourage you to ask me questions in the comment section below, because I'll be very happy to answer any of them. And once again, I just wanted to highlight the fact that all of these experiences are my own subjective experiences, and they were also impacted by my own circumstances, by the fact that I had to work full time, so obviously I had less time to schedule certain things. I was much younger, not that I'm old right now, but I just had different attitude towards everything. And at the time, even though I still believe that I was quite resourceful, I feel like I could have used the time a little bit differently. But obviously I can only reflect on that from this present moment right now, and having the knowledge that I have. On the other hand, I think I would handle my finances a bit differently, because later on I found out that there are ways of like getting a maintenance loan, for example, and that would allow me to focus more on studies. So if you are worried a little bit about the finance, please look into these things as well, because there are many options available to you that sometimes are just kind of hidden just around the corner, and you might find out from all of your friends how to actually deal with this kind of stuff. And you know, maybe this way you wouldn't have to work the same amount of hours as I did, because I did like full-time job, and that kind of pushed away the studies from me a little bit. And at this point I was pretty exhausted most of the time. So this is why I didn't really use my time perfectly. But you know, that's my own situation. So yours might be completely different, but I hope at the end you could actually learn something from me as well, and that helped you making your own decision. If you did enjoy this video, please hit the like button and consider subscribing to my channel. And basically, I'll see you in the next one. Thanks a lot, guys. See you soon.